The following was recorded on Monday, October the 14th, 1963, and the medium was Leslie Flint and the interviewer was Betty Greene. They communicated with a spirit called Alfred Higgins. Alfred, I was a painter and decorator and fell off a ladder, but wasn't killed outright and died in hospital. This was quite a few years ago. When I first realised what had happened to me, I was lying on a bank overlooking a river and didn't know how I got there. Then I saw someone coming towards me, dressed like a monk. I thought he looked like Jesus, and he came and sat beside me and spoke to me. He said, "You've arrived." I said, "I don't know what you mean." He said, "You don't realise where you are?" I said, "I don't recognise this place. It's very beautiful." He said, "You're dead, you know." I said, "How can I be dead? I wouldn't be able to see and look. I'm solid." He said, "A lot of people seem to think on your side that when they're dead, they're either nothing at all, or if they're dead, they go to heaven, or they go to some place like hell. There's no such place as heaven, and there's no such place as hell. You're in a condition of life that is real as anything you've ever known before. Life beyond death is a state of mind." Alfred said, "I'm a bit concerned about my people, and it must be a terrible shock for them. I have no recollection of dying, and don't remember anything bar falling. You died in the hospital, you know. Would you like to go back to see your people? Do you think that would help you?" "Well, I'd like to see them." "They won't take any notice of you, you know." "Why not?" "Well, they won't realise that you're there because they can't see you, and they won't hear you." "I'd like to see how Ada, my wife's, getting on. How do we get there?" "You just come with me and we'll walk up this road." Well, I climbed up the hillside and onto the road. We walked along, and he said, "Take my hand." And as soon as I touched it, everything went peculiar. Everything disappeared, and it was like going to sleep. Then I was standing in our kitchen, and I was watching my wife peel potatoes. I called her name, but she couldn't hear me. He said, "She won't hear you, but she may sense your presence. So concentrate your thoughts on her and think as hard as you can. Think her name." All of a sudden, she stood up and dropped the knife and turned around looking bewildered. She looked scared and realised it must have been me trying to get to her. She sat down and put her head on the table and started to cry, and I felt awful. He said, "She doesn't understand, but she knows in herself that you're near her." He said, "I think the best thing for us is to go back." And I said, "Do you mind coming into a pub?" And he laughed. I said, "It seems strange to ask an angel to come into a pub." He said, "We often go into pubs and places, and I'm not an angel." "Oh, I was under the impression that since you're highly respectable, you must be, but you got no wings." He laughed. "Of course you don't have wings. That's the old idea that a lot of religious people get on earth about angels having wings. They always think that when people die, they fly up into heaven. They used to think the only way to get up into the sky was to sprout wings like birds." He then put his hand up towards me, and I put my hand in his. The next thing I knew, I was standing in the bar of the pub, and there were 3 of my old mates there. So I concentrated hard. My friend had a mug of beer, so I thought his name, and all of a sudden, he plonked it down on the counter. He looked bewildered and looked around. He said to my other 2 friends, "That's funny. I felt sure I heard something. Didn't you hear something?" They said, "We didn't hear anything." And the friends said, "Oh, it's nothing." They all laughed and said, "What's up? You got the jitters." But he heard me all right, and it was done by my thoughts, because you can't just do it by speaking out in the old way. I learned a lot more about my guide and found that he was a leader of a vast group of people and was a teacher. I learned a great deal from him. He said the only way to get in touch with anyone on earth is to go to a spiritualist church. So I started visiting the missus again to impress her to go to a spiritualist church, which was about 18 months after I died. I eventually got the idea into her head to visit a spiritualist church, and she went with her sister Floss. They sat at the back, and the medium was on a platform. The medium didn't strike me as being much good, and seemed a bit on the holy side, and she wasn't so hot on the evidence, and didn't seem to be able to describe very well. When she started to give messages, I thought I've got to concentrate like mad on her, and eventually she picked it up. She said, "I see a ladder," but the medium got it all confused and said, "I think something is going to be very good for you. I see you going up this ladder towards success." Well, this wasn't what I was trying to tell the silly medium. It was her interpretation. Eventually, I was able to get my name through. Then my wife said my husband was killed on a ladder and his name was Alf. I thought, what can I say that'll really clinch it? So I concentrated on the medium and tried to get something through, but it was very difficult. So I impressed the medium to say, that ring you have on, that is not the same ring. This didn't seem to make sense to anyone, but it had a great deal of significance to my missus. My wife lost her wedding ring, but didn't tell me she'd lost it, knowing that I'd be upset. So she bought another one, which was identical. Well, I've since learned about this over here, and there's not much that I didn't know that went on. So I concentrated on the wedding ring that she'd lost and then replaced. Of course, she went quite white. She said, how could my husband know that? I've never told him and kept it from him. The medium said, you know it's proof from your husband, isn't it, my dear? I was really happy about that. My wife became very interested after that and went to several meetings. By the way, that happened about 30 odd years ago, and she's here with me now. Some spiritualist meetings are well-meaning, but half are not really developed properly, and a lot of it is their imagination. Occasionally they get something right, but I think a lot of them like to appear important to the rest of the congregation. They're well-meaning, but they can do a lot of harm. He was asked what he was doing now on the other side. I get a great deal of pleasure looking after other people and helping them get settled when they first come here. They're not quite the same, but people like a home. They like things around them that they're used to. Some of them have been living on their own for years. Most of them have their relatives here who welcome them. But I like to feel that I can help them get settled at home. The conditions are very similar on Earth. Ours is a real world, and we have houses. We have our places that we go to, where we visit friends. We have educational centres. We have great libraries, where there's wonderful books you can read, and places you can go and hear wonderful music. We live together in peace and harmony, where colour and nationality mean nothing to us. There's no friction like there is in your world between religions, organisations and political parties. Here we realise that we are all truly part of God's kingdom, and we're striving to develop and better ourselves mentally and spiritually. A lot of people from your side think that as soon as we come here, we cease to be human beings. We cease to be the same people. We're the same people, but wiser, more sensible, more understanding, more tolerant. We have the same opportunity in the highest sense, spiritually and mentally. No one should fear dying. It's something to look forward to. All my blessings. Goodbye.